Grummz on X. Ubisoft employees are in mass panic after reorg, stock drop. My sources are telling me they are dumping their employee shares in the company, feeling like it's going to get much worse. And I've heard that from multiple sources as well. And you guys said Yasuke isn't an assassin? Yep. Even mainstream reporters are picking up on the panic inside Ubisoft. It is offices on figurative fire right now. Tom Henderson. Ubisoft's internal communication channels are full of employees shaming upper management and asking for change. Ubisoft is going to experience a massive exodus of talent, even without the impending layoffs. That's what they want. How should that surprise anyone? When they put out the return to work order that I talked about in a previous video covering Ubisoft, I said there that companies do that in hopes that people do quit. Miss me with the Ubisoft's going to have a mass exodus of talent. If Ubisoft had talent working at their studio, they'd be making Expedition 33s and not Assassin's Creed Shadows. Following announcement of Ubisoft's restructuring and third round of cost-cutting measures, Ubisoft's internal communication channels are full of employees shaming upper management and asking for change. It's quite something seeing people very openly criticizing a company they work for to such an extent. But after years of struggle, it's not surprising. They have got to be boiling over with frustration. For if you've worked at Ubisoft for anything longer than 4, 5, 6 years, you have lost 70+% of your value in the stock. So every dollar you've put in, all your employee stock options and share, your retirement, everything you thought you'd have at the end of your career there is worthless right now. It's down 95%. This is hitting all-time lows. The stock is below $1 right now. It ended at 91 cents. In the past 5 years, it's down almost 96%. Imagine starting work at Ubisoft exactly 5 years ago and getting a stock option package that was worth $100,000. And now it's worth what? 5? Like, it's lost everything. Some employees tell me that this was the final nail in the coffin for them and that they will be seeking employment elsewhere. And others have decided to fast track their already existing contingency plans in case they were laid off. More have taken to LinkedIn to publicly announce that they are now looking for work despite still having a job at the company, which again could go back to returning to work orders. And they're like, well, I'll keep working until they fire me. But in the meantime, I'm going to look for another job that could be remote work because I don't want to go back into an office. I moved away. I've had kids. I got married and have a family I'm raising. We have daycare set up and everything organized. You don't want to have to start going into the office after you have your life all put together like that. So I can definitely empathize with employees in that situation. And Ubisoft knows that. And they're trying to take advantage of that by making people quit so they don't have to pay them a severance. Ubisoft is going to experience a massive exodus of talent, even without the impending layoffs. This is the human cost. Ubisoft's next cost-cutting measure could see another 2,000 jobs lost. That is crazy. Yesterday's Ubisoft announcement of its massive restructuring has made headlines across the industry for canceling projects, closing down studios, and delaying projects. But one of the biggest announcements, for the most part, has been overlooked by many. Of course, I'm talking about the human impact of the recent restructuring and recently announced cost-cutting measures aimed to save the publisher an additional 200 million euros by the end of March 2028. This Ubisoft company is going to be a shell of itself by the end of 2028, assuming they even make it there, which at this point is a leap. According to Ubisoft, this will be the third and final phase after the first 55 phases. This is the third and final of its cost cutting and will end by March 2028. Ubisoft is still going through its second phase, which started 4 years ago and was a 300 million euro cost-cutting measure, which honestly is not really that much money in the grand scheme. If you consider that that's probably around the cost of what Assassin's Creed Shadows was to get out the door after marketing and everything else, that's just a game. So for 4 years of employment, 300 million is really not shaving that much off the company payroll. In that time, Ubisoft has decreased its headcount from 20,729 in September 2022 to 17,097 as of September 2025. And I remember when I first found this out years ago that Ubisoft had over 20,000 people working for them, I said back then, I'm like, this is not sustainable. Nintendo has like 7,000 people working for them worldwide. Nintendo. We're talking Ubisoft, which makes slop games for the most part. The properties make a fraction of what Nintendo makes, yet they have 3 times the amount of employees. A reduction of around 3,632 developers. Ubisoft London, Osaka, San Francisco, Leamington, Halifax, and Stockholm will have closed their doors. More layoffs at the company will also be announced on February 12th, 2026. It doesn't take a genius then to see that an additional 200 million euros in cost cutting will lead to yet more studio closures and layoffs. Ubisoft's third cost-cutting measure will be 2/3 of the second round. So with that round, see 3,632 jobs lost, and using similar proportions, we can calculate that the next round could see an approximately 2,400 jobs lost by the end of March 2028. On top of that, Ubisoft is set to enforce the return to work that I talked about earlier and offering annual allowances for working from home. It's a move that Ubisoft says will help efficiency, creativity, and collective success. That's bullshit. Everyone knows that this is a way to get people to quit. Efficiency and creativity by forcing people to go into the office? No. But many developers see it as another attempt to force yet more employees to leave the company as part of cost saving. Exactly. Anytime a company starts struggling, the first thing that corporate does is force a return to office. Every single time, not just in gaming, across the board in business. It's part of Ubisoft's strategy to prevent announcing mass layoffs, for the most part, to avoid negative press. Well, I think we're well past that day. I wonder if it's more there's an alternative reason why they're afraid to announce it, meaning if there's some sort of back-end governmental support propping them up, and they want to keep as many people there as possible to continue the benefits that they're seeing behind the scenes from them. Because honestly, I've been racking my brain. I can't come up with any other reason why they wouldn't just cut the fat and move on with their lives. Over the last few years, Ubisoft has continued to reduce its headcount through similar ploys, including not renewing contracts, giving developers nothing to do, and hopes they'll leave, which is actually a strategy that I first heard about in Japan, because they have very strict employment laws there where you can't just fire people. So they would have rooms set up for the people. They would have to clock in, and their job would be to sit at the desk for 8 hours a day with the half an hour lunch, not do anything. They just had to sit there, and they would go into a room and they'd be told to sit in that room. That would be, they've been redirected to do that job. And that's what the company needs them to do. And they would just make them come in as like a prison sentence, make them come in every single day to do that in hopes that they would just quit, because it would be less on the company to keep paying them to do that instead of firing them and dealing with the laws that Japan had. So it's curious that a Canadian-based company or French-Canadian-based company is doing that and enforcing RTO, return to office mandates. Bigger changes needed. Ubisoft has been on a downward trend for a number of years. That is putting it very nice. Despite having a great future pipeline of games, that is putting it very glowingly. But the constant mismanagement, structural changes, and lack of ownership from higher-ups have led to one of the most horrible environments for developers to work in the games industry. I disagree so strongly with this entire statement. It's not even funny. They're blaming from the top down. It's an issue. I'm saying, well, outside of the hiring problems, the people they brought in were not bringing in creativity. They were DEI hires. They were injecting an ideology into their games everywhere they went. They're trying to see how we can get a girl boss in this game, how we can insert another black person in this area. How can we make sure we can check these boxes on these things instead of going in there and being creative and making a good game? They were more worried about how do we hit these check boxes. And the only blame I'd place on leadership is by enabling that kind of environment. How are developers meant to get excited about their work and be productive and creative when they know thousands more of their colleagues will likely be gone in the next couple of years? So that's a good point. When the same mistakes from leadership continue to happen year after year without accountability, when another restructuring and more cost-cutting measures will happen in the coming years. It's pretty evident that Ubisoft's big restructuring needs to happen from the top and not the other way around. There is something to be said for that, but at the same time, the top is never going to take accountability and say, you're right, I need to step down. No, of course they're going to be, it's everyone below me that's the problem here. When in reality, if Ubisoft actually had true leadership with Yves Guillemot, he would go in there and be like, I would argue he's one of the biggest problem there, but he would go in there and say, we need to actually start making good games. Our priorities are fucked. Whatever you guys are doing here is not what the gamers want. We're making propaganda. We're pushing messaging over the priority of making a good game. We've lost our way. You can clearly tell he's never had that conversation with them. And ironically, they're still somehow, according to Pirate Nation, Beyond Good and Evil 2, reportedly still in development at Ubisoft. It survived the recent game cancellations at the company and was announced over 17 years ago. Now, to be fair, they might just be waiting on announcing the cancellation of this game. But from what I've heard, it's gone through multiple leads. They have finally put someone in charge again towards the end of last year to start back on it. But at this point with Ubisoft, it's like, how much money has been spent on this? Is this vaporware? Has it always been vaporware? Or was there ever actually a game they were working on? Makes you wonder. And speaking of vaporware and games they were working on, Grummz, Prince of Persia, why it was really canceled. Insider tells all. The game is so bad. 90% developed by Ubisoft India. I think I found your problem with bullet point number 1. Project was a disaster. Transferred last minute to Ubisoft Montreal to fix it. Game was unfixable. Canceled. This is from my Ubisoft sources, which falls directly in line with Guru Larry that I talked about the other day, who said the entire development of the game was utter clown shoes. 7 years to port a fucking PS2 game. I'm friends with a few ex-Ubisoft staff. They gave the entire development of the Switch version to one single guy in India, and he had to stop as he caught COVID. What a complete shit show Ubisoft India has been. What a terrible experiment. Thinking they could save money. You get what you pay for. How many times do you have to tell people this? Learning the law. Ubisoft leaned so hard into diversity instead of focusing on the male audience that they diversified all their assets and went bankrupt. Ubisoft India Studios. More than 135 plus women at Ubisoft Pune and Mumbai came together to attend a special session conducted on diversity and inclusion. It's globalization. Again, this has nothing to fucking do with gaming. This is the WEF pushing agendas. This is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation finding its way into every fucking orifice in the game industry. Diversity and inclusion in a country where they throw shit at each other for fun? Yeah, sure. Why not? Have fun with that. Naive. If you invested $10,000 into Ubisoft 5 years ago, today you would have $300 after tax. Go woke, go broke. And we'll leave it at this. The stock has returned to form. Aron Darklord says, we did it, lads. Ubisoft has closed at its lowest point ever in its entire history, officially turning it into a penny stock on U.S. exchanges. Get woke, go broke. We might end up killing the whole company. Hope they go Chapter 7 and Elon buys up the IPs at the auction. I think it's not going to have anything to do with Elon Musk, as much as that would be amazing. I think this is going to go back to the Tencent situation with them being a part of the silo that they created, getting the Assassin's Creed franchise, Rainbow Six franchise, and the Far Cry franchise. They knew back then, they did their research. They saw that Ubisoft was a complete catastrophe, clown shoe shit show. And they were like, yep, we're going to take a part of that. We're going to bite into this and take all the best parts of it. And as your company starts falling apart around you, we might start picking up some other things as we go along until we eventually envelop your entire studio. But first, you need to get rid of all the dead weight. We are in that phase right now. And that looks like it's going to be lasting for the next couple of years. Again, if the company survives that long. And I am very curious if Montreal or Canada in general specifically is giving additional taxpayer money to the company as kickbacks for employing so many people, because otherwise there is no explanation to hire that many people for a video game. That's insanity. Like, unless you have your own console, and even then, look at Nintendo, you don't need 20,000+ people working there. That's insane. But we will see. That's the latest on Ubisoft. For now, they're still around, hanging by a thread. But I'll leave that there. The Jester for the 5-banger. I think Tencent can buy the whole company for dirt cheap now. That's not a good idea, though, because if they bought Ubisoft, they'd be buying $2 billion worth of debt. It would be the same thing if why a company didn't buy THQ. They just let THQ go belly up and then pick up the properties for dirt cheap afterwards. That way you're not picking up the debt with it. So it would make no sense to just buy the whole company, because then you're buying the debt. Why would you do that? Jester for another 2. Beyond Good and Evil 2 coming February 30th, 2099. You should have an asterisk there saying placeholder.